Welcome to today's Revenue Coach Masterclass. This session is being broadcast live on LinkedIn, Twitter and YouTube, and it's being recorded. I'm Alistair Cole, your host for this session, co-founder and CEO of Revenue Coach, a SaaS coaching platform that demystifies the sales process for founders and accelerates startup growth. This is the 7th masterclass in our new series where we explore some of the current challenges in the workplace for sales professionals and some of the opportunities. And one of those is the topic for today, the science of words that sell. Our guest today, I'm delighted to say, is Elle Connolly, international writer specializing in using psychology to craft sales copy that sells. Elle's the founder of 23 Wise Words, a provider of online writing courses and multi-channel masterclasses. Welcome, Elle.
Hello, thank you. International writer makes me sound very, very professional. I like that one.
Well, I think, Harrogate via Sydney to Revenue Coach Masterclass counts as international. Well, look, thanks very much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you here. And writing copy that closes sounds like a dream to me, and I'm sure to all the salespeople on the call. Before we get into how that's possible, could you tell us a little bit about how you got to a place where you're now teaching psychology-backed copywriting?
Yeah, so I started in PR actually. So my degree is in psychology and PR, and I kind of had this really deep interest in psychology, and I was kind of like, it's great, but am I going to become a psychologist or a psychotherapist? Probably not. So I'll park that and I'll go into PR and marketing. So I spent kind of the majority of my career in different marketing agencies, in PR agencies. Always loved writing, and always kind of tried to seek roles where I was writing. And then I had what I like to call the mum life crisis, which I think a lot of people, women especially, can relate to, where you kind of go off to have a baby and you don't want to go back to that traditional 9-to-5 corporate life. So I started my business then, 23 Wise Words. Back then it was still what I would now class as content writing, although I would have called myself a copywriter back then. And I think there is a lot of confusion there in that copywriters who are actually writing content and not copy, which is more words that sell, are actually calling themselves copywriters. So there's a bit of confusion there. But I started content writing, blogs, ebooks, all that kind of content marketing stuff that builds the brand. And then one day I had this kind of epiphany of actually copywriting when I'm trying to make a sale or persuade someone to take an action I want them to take is massively critical if I'm using psychology in it. I have to use psychology. And I was like, why is no one talking about this? Why is no one really kind of marrying those two ideas of, yes, I think we talk about sales psychology when we're talking to people in real life or maybe over the phone and closing sales that way. But it's not often talked about from the written word point of view, and how to kind of weave in those persuasion principles and the sales psychology into words in order to close in that format as well. And as we know, businesses are now digital, they're online, we're writing all the time, we're closing digitally all the time. And it's so important to have these skills from a sales perspective in your writing, as well as knowing these skills when you're talking to someone face to face or over Zoom or however else you're closing sales. So that was kind of how the journey kind of took me here. And now, I'm just really passionate about just kind of instilling those basic sales psychology skills into writing and helping salespeople and business owners, CEOs, coaches, anyone who has to write for a business or for their business, just kind of helping them understand what those principles are that can really help them drive sales and get people to convert.
Yeah. What are the 23 wise words?
I knew you were going to ask me that. You asked me that last time we spoke. Look, the story has been reversed engineered, actually. So there aren't 23 wise words. I did have a mission statement at one point, which I did kind of create 23 words. But honestly, I wanted wise words as a URL. it wasn't available. My son's birthday is the 23rd of August, and I was on maternity leave with him, so which is when the business came about. So I was like, right, 23 wise words. Where after that, I found out that the number 23 is very kind of weaved into mythology and folklore. There's a lot around that number. I think we spoke about this last time. So now I'm pretty pleased with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But honestly, there aren't 23 wise words as a backstory, but yeah.
Well, certainly it's intriguing to know about the number. So great to hear that. And, you know, you could argue that catch in those are the first two characters, right, of the company name and the URL. And we were talking a little bit before about headlines and first words. And for people who are watching, listening to this masterclass, salespeople thinking about how they might use some science to hit their targets, exceed their targets, you know, often that first thing is so important, whether it's the subject of an email or the opening line of what you know, and we talked about this and how people grapple with it. What tips could you give on anyone on the masterclass about the headline or that first few words?
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, first of all, from a purely tactical point of view, just before I kind of talk around headlines and where to start and things, people read in an F pattern, right? So when, especially on a web page, if we're reading a kind of block piece of text, we'll skim in an F pattern, which means we usually read the first full line. Then we'll skim the first few words of the next slide, and then maybe a few less words of the next slide, just to get a gauge of whether we want to read it or not. Okay. So that kind of gives you a bit of kind of a clue as to how important those first few words are and the first few words of your line. So, for example, if you need to split your headline over 2 lines, if it doesn't fit over 1 sentence, you need to be really mindful of the word that you're splitting it up at. So the first word of the second line needs to be a word you want someone to remember and that's going to grab attention. So don't split the sentence and have like "and" as the first word of the second line. Just things like that. Just bearing in mind the F pattern really helps, just because it'll mean you'll kind of front load your best words onto those top few lines, and it helps people that are skimming. If people are skimming, they read those, it's words they want to see, it's words they're interested in, they'll stop and read the rest. So just as a kind of side note, just remembering that F pattern can really help. From a psychological point of view, as humans, we are more motivated to avoid pain than to gain a benefit. So if we start with pain points, and you'll see this everywhere, like we start with problems, you'll read a blog, it starts with the problem. You read a web page, it starts with the pain point, though, the frustration that the reader's facing. And from a psychological point of view, there is a reason behind that. And the reason is we're more likely to be hooked in and read because we want to avoid pain. More often than not, if you start with the outcome, and I'm not saying that quite often I suggest headlines can be outcomes, and I'll come back to that. But when you're talking body copy, those first lines, that first paragraph should really be the problem in order to hook people in. And there's different ways of kind of doing that. And there's different, obviously with different platforms and different reasons for your writing. But as a general rule, if you don't know where to start, and if you're just kind of drawing a blank, got your blank screen in front of you, starting with the problem is 90% of the time going to be your best option because people are just more likely to read it. So yeah, I would definitely say, and there's kind of copywriting techniques like start with the problem, aggravate the problem, give them the solution, and then give them the outcome, which is kind of, as a general rule, can be your opening paragraph to a blog, to a web page, to an email. It's just a nice little formula that we call the PESO formula. So problem, aggravation, solution, and outcome. Just a nice little way of remembering how to start things.
Okay, that's great. We're going to come back to that. Focusing in on this first paragraph, right? We're talking about showing the pain first, and then I love thinking about that first word on the second line. If you have to break it, how far do we turn? Should salespeople be turning the dial in terms of the pain? How scary should they be? Because obviously you could go crazy. It revulses people. So where do you stop with the dial?
Yeah, look, it depends on what you're writing, okay? So, and it depends on your industry as well. So I do get this quite a lot where people are kind of like, my audience doesn't necessarily feel a pain. So they might be feeling more of a frustration. And it is going to depend on your industry. What I would say is, and you don't want to scaremonger, right? You don't really want to be these people, it's like all doom and gloom the whole time. But what I will say is that it really is powerful psychologically to really kind of make sure your reader understands that you understand them empathetically. So it's kind of in kind of real life interactions, there's a psychological kind of principle called mirroring, which you're probably familiar with. So the idea is that if you want to build empathy and connection with someone subconsciously, you'll mirror their behavior. So you'll mirror their facial expressions, you'll mirror sometimes how they speak, you'll mirror their body language. And that's what we do kind of automatically without thinking. When we're reading something that someone's written, we obviously can't mirror their facial expressions, we can't mirror their body language, so we have to mirror what's going on in their head. And there's always a turning point where people kind of go from that point of, this is a pain I have, but I can live with it, to this is a pain or a challenge or a frustration I have and I want to do something about it. And that's the point they're going to convert. That's the point they're going to come to you to make the sale, right? So if you can put as many pain points and mirror what is in their head on your page at the point when they're ready to take that action, at the point when they've almost hit that turning point, then that is what's going to convert them in, because they can see that you understand them. You're building empathy, you're building connection, just like you would in real life with mirroring their body language. You're actually mirroring what's going on in their head. So in answer to that question around how much do you dial it up, I don't think you can dial it up too much, especially on a sales page. So say if somebody is on at the point of converting, so you're wanting to try and convert them into a program you've got, or a package you've got, or a product that you're selling. So they're at the point where they're about to buy or part with their money. At this point, it's really important to show as many kind of pain points and delve into what they're feeling in their head as much as possible. And more often than not, they're feeling pain, they're feeling frustration, they're feeling challenges, rather than, they're not thinking about the ultimate outcome so much as I want this frustration or this challenge to be over and I need a solution to it. So seeing those on the page is going to be really powerful.
Okay, so definitely enough pain that it's no longer livable. It's not something I can live with on a daily basis. I want to make a change.
Yes.
and the sky's the limit. And so I guess that could be, concerned about hitting a target, missing targets, not closing enough deals, deal size too small. So anything like that for salespeople.
And just being really, really specific. So what I try and do when I'm trying to really understand what's going on in someone's head, and there are techniques to do this from a research point of view, but a really kind of easy exercise you can do is literally imagine what that person is doing right now at the point where they need to take action to solve this problem. So for example, for me, I teach people how to write their website copy. So if I'm trying to imagine really specifically the scenario they're in when they might want to use me, I imagine they've grabbed a cup of coffee, they've blocked out their calendar, they've sat down at their computer, they've opened their laptop, they're kind of doing this, they're really kind of preparing themselves, fingers over the keyboard, mind blank. And they're like, I can't do this on my own. And it's 4 hours later, all the time that they blocked out is gone. They've written a page. So I really imagine themselves in that scenario, and then I write that down on my page. I don't just say, oh, and you find it difficult to write your website because you don't have inspiration. I really paint that picture. So it can be a really powerful exercise for a salesperson to do, is actually kind of what are they doing at that point where the frustration has just got too much for them.
I think that's a really big takeaway for anybody listening about, you do it really well on your website. It's a very human thing. So it's easy to say, well, you'd buy our system from us because it speeds things up, but actually closing your eyes and putting yourselves in the seat of the buyer, how do they feel emotionally as a human? So that, I think that's really great. So let's keep going with your kind of pain. What was next?
Hey, so pain aggravation.
Yeah. So if that first bit is about the pain, then what what would be your tips in aggravation for how a salesperson might then, articulate or expand on that pain? Give an example.
So the easiest example I would, and one thing as well to just note is this peso technique is not a kind of long body of copy. It's just a paragraph long, just to kind of hook the person in. The easiest example is probably the weight loss industry. So the weight loss industry do peso really, really well. And we can all relate to it. And we've all seen these adverts. So they may start with, can't fit into your favorite swimsuit anymore. So that's your problem, right? This is the problem where they're kind of like, all right, I need to do something about this. I can't fit into my favorite swimsuit. Their aggravation would be, and your summer holiday to Morocco is just around the corner, or something kind of, Morocco doesn't have a beach, let's say Tenerife. Your summer holiday to Tenerife is just around the corner. So that's the aggravation, right? It's just another layer on the problem that just helps them kind of really internalize it and envisage themselves in that place. And then you move around to the solution. Why not join our 4-week belly fat loss program outcome and walk onto the beach full of confidence in your favorite bathing suit? So you'd probably word it better than I just have, but you can kind of see how it's not a long paragraph. It's not War and Peace. But it just takes someone from the place they're at, layering on that level of anxiety or aggravation, and then round to your solution and what life could be like after in a really nice, quick, succinct way.
I'm guessing that's the Sydney influence coming through.
Yeah, probably.
So look, that's great.
Not pain in England, is it?
No, I mean that's great. That peso framework I think is really helpful. And that works brilliantly on the page, and so thanks for that. What about a lot of communication is digital now, and we've got email and social media, and attention spans are shorter, and it's even more challenging to grab people's attention. So, what in terms of getting people to open emails or converting people or getting that meeting, it's even shorter, right? You don't really have time in a subject line or a headline to do the full peso. So what tips would you give anybody here about how they might rethink that first sentence, that subject?
Yeah. Email is actually one of my favorite formats of writing because it gives you so much scope for storytelling, which of course is a buzzword of the industry, but is crucial in building connections and kind of getting people to where you kind of need them to be. So let's talk about subject lines of emails, which I think is like, there's so much advice out there as to what to do. The only job of a subject line is to get your email opened. Just like the only job of a headline is to get someone to read the next sentence. The only job of any piece of copy is to move someone along to the point of the click, to the point of the conversion. So when you think of a subject line like that, so the first thing you need to do is it needs to be noticed. Okay, it's not going to get clicked or opened without being noticed. So it's just a kind of disruption technique. So as we know, using emojis in subject lines helps. We know using someone's first name in the subject line really helps. We know that disrupting the inbox by it maybe being one word or a really long subject line. So just kind of doing things differently in terms of, like, you might usually see a subject line that's maybe 5 or 6 words long. So why not just do one that's 1 word long? Or why not do one that's 10 words long? So it's just disrupting that sea of sameness in the inbox. So in terms of actual techniques for subject lines, other than kind of first name, emoji, that kind of thing, words like, there's a technique we call double curiosity stacking. So the idea is that instead of saying, read to find out the 10 best recipes of the year or something. So that's curiosity, right? That's asking us, someone's going to need to click in order to get it. We want to add another layer of curiosity to that. So it might be something like, this is the best recipe you're going to read this year. So it's almost like not just one layer. Oh yeah, I want to open up and see the recipe. I want to open up and see what is that particular recipe that they're gonna tell me that's even better than the list, you know? So it's called double curiosity stacking in a subject line. It really works very, very well for email, just trying to get people to click that button.
And so is that when I'll see these articles saying 7 tips to lose beer belly, is that what you're talking about, that double curiosity? It's not just that I can lose it, but there's something else.
So 7 tips to lose my beer. But I love the way we've got on a weight theme now, haven't we? It's January, so it's topical. That would be one layer of curiosity. So that's just, you're asking someone to click and say, so they can find out what these 7 tips are. Layering a double layer of curiosity would be, for example, saying, this. See, it's kind of using the word like this or that. So I would put this in like asterisks. Is the beer belly buster.
Yeah.
And then I might say brackets and 10 other tips or something like that. So you've kind of really, there's one level of the curiosity there, and then there's another level because you've kind of added on this. Okay, there's one I really need to read.
Okay, that makes sense. And so that's really helpful in terms of the subject lines and that first headline, trying to make it as disruptive as possible. And should that extend to being provocative? How kind of, cheeky should people be who are on the masterclass? How cheeky would you advise them to be?
That kind of comes down to a brand voice perspective, I think. It's important just to remain consistent as well. So you don't want to be, I think the other reason I like email a lot is you can push the boundaries a little bit more potentially, and they're a little bit more kind of conversational and informal, and maybe you can have a little bit more fun with the puns and things. But you still need to remain authentic to the brand voice and to what people are going to see if they speak to you. Are you going to sound the same? If they go on your website, is that going to be a kind of similar tone? It doesn't need to be exactly the same, but it can be really obvious when someone is trying too hard to be something they're not, right? All the time when I do voice of customer strategy work, so quite often there's the kind of CEO who wants to shake things up and be a bit more disruptive, and then there's maybe someone else who's wants to be a bit more, the marketer wants to be more conservative, say, and we come up with this really great brand of voice, and then the end result is that it just goes through the lines of approval and just gets washed down and washed down and washed down. So it does really need to be authentic to what you feel comfortable saying and talking about. Having said that, if you feel comfortable being a bit more provocative, I would say what you want to do is get someone to open, right? Or read on. So if you can do that through using provocative kind of language and more interesting conversational language than we're used to, then if it gets the click, that's the ultimate goal, right? Without compromising your integrity, of course.
Okay, so some people listening, people watching, that sounds great, little tips and the paragraphs and the PESO, I think is a brilliant framework. If somebody's kind of on board with those and they're thinking, yeah, I reckon I could make a change and maybe improve my writing, write better copy that's going to close. Yeah. What would be your recommendation about a next step they might be able to perform later today? What would be a recommendation about how to start building that muscle? Where could they go? What tool can they use? What would you recommend as a next step?
Okay, so I've got a lot of tips for websites, but I think in terms of like what someone listening or watching right now can do today is not necessarily going to be about changing websites and things. So I'm not going to kind of go down that route. Although I do want to give a little tip, which I think could be really useful for people. If you do want to make a slight change to your website, these are 2 things I would suggest to do. So first of all is to put binary choice call to actions at the bottom of your homepage. So that means instead of asking somebody just to take the action you want them to take, whether that's book a demo, whether it's book a call, whatever that is, give them that option, of course, but also give them a secondary option. It could be to download something, you've got a freebie, or it could just be to navigate them to a different part of the site. Because as humans, we like to make decisions in binary choice. So we like to either decide this one or this one. If we get more than 2 decisions to make, we get a bit confused. So if you only give somebody one option at the bottom of your homepage, so just do this, their other option is to do nothing, right? So their binary choice is either click this button or don't click this button. And then 50% of the time you may have lost them. Whereas if you give the binary choice to either do this or do this, the option to do nothing is a third choice. And, the human brain gets all scrambled and we're like, no, I can't. So you're more likely to get someone to take an action you want them to take. So if you do nothing else, I would just suggest bottom of your homepage, make the call to action binary choice. It'll just help keep people either on your website or making a choice you want them to take rather than doing nothing. And another little tip I would put, lots of my tips are around the buttons because that is the point of conversion and they're so crucial. I would say look at all your buttons. So wherever you've got, maybe it's in an email, maybe it's on a sales page, maybe it's on social media, wherever you've got somewhere where you're asking someone to take an action, put a click trigger near it. And a click trigger is something that is just going to tip someone over the edge to actually want to click. So it's things like testimonials. It's a really short, no more than 2 lines testimonial. It's a statistic. So how many people you have helped do this. It's something that really does just kind of, you've said all you want to say, they're about to click the button and it's just that extra bit of credibility or that extra bit of trust building that's just going to help them click. And it's what we call a click trigger. And you can put those near all your buttons and it's a nice little kind of optimization tip that you can probably implement on pretty much anything you write. And
these principles of the binary choice, I love that. Does that work? And these triggers, the mini triggers, does that also work if I was writing an email trying to get somebody to take a meeting? Does that work in that too?
The binary choice doesn't work as well with email only because in that kind of format, and same on landing pages as well, we want to stick to the rule of 1. So you're writing for one audience, one message, one call to action, particularly on landing pages. Don't give people too many options to not do what you want them to do. The binary choice thing works really well when you're asking someone to make a bigger commitment that they might not be ready to make.
Yeah.
So you give them something else that's a smaller commitment. So that's why it works particularly well for web pages. You could potentially use it in email in that you might kind of ask someone to book a call and then put in the PS, in the meantime, why don't you check out this blog we wrote? So you're just kind of keeping them in your world a little bit. But the binary choice thing is mainly for your website and your home pages.
Well, thank you. I mean, the super detailed tips you've given are fantastic. That binary choice, which word you choose if you're breaking your first paragraph or your headline across 2 lines. I thought that was gold dust. And, that recommendation of using disruptive language in an email subject line and trying to, the curiosity or double curiosity, trying to make that as curious, as disruptive and sparking curiosity is key. The biggest thing for me was the pace. So, laying out your communication in terms of the pain, aggravation, the solution, and then the outcome they get. Yeah. So really fantastic. It's been, thank you so much for those insights and for your time. If anybody wanted to reach out to you with any further questions, where could they go, Elle?
Yeah, the best place is probably Instagram at 23 Wise Words. I'm always on there sharing tips and tricks. And then in the link in my bio, you can kind of, see different ways to my world. So I've got a Science Behind Copy That Converts, kind of a free email mini class, which is, I kind of delve a bit more into the persuasion principles and things. So I would say that, or I'm on YouTube as well, at 23 Wise Words on YouTube, sharing videos and tips and tricks and copywriting hacks and all sorts. So those are probably the best places.
Fantastic. And if anybody wants to know more about Revenue Coach, how we demystify the sales process for founders and accelerate startup growth, they can head over to revenuecoach.ai. And we're finishing bang on time. It's been really insightful and an absolute pleasure. Elle, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Thanks, Alistair. It's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, we'll leave it there.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for watching, listening. That's it. We're out.
Bye-bye.
Bye.